Last we get into Jordan Sheridan. He had a thread earlier this morning talking about trying to say what's the current state of the left that's going on, that they're loving the current divide and conquer, cancellation and never-ending war among indie media, to rightfully politically frustrated progressives giving this oxygen for a month at the expense of all else. This is what they want. First off, that's only if you believe that groups like the left is aligned with TYT, Majority Report, Rational National types. If you believe those groups are together, that's the only time you think there's a real divide. But if you don't think that these two actual factions are actually together, then you're not. Then you just flat out disagree with that. Although I will say that if you're still calling this movement as a whole progressive, then you're not quite understanding how the progressive label has been valued, because even though labels can be a dumb hang-up at times, the real value is now in a left movement. In reality, this goes back far earlier this year in the current online war between hosts and channels. Started seeing this in 2016 after Bernie Sanders endorsed Hillary Clinton. Rightfully disappointed and frustrated progressives began turning on Bernie and diving headfirst into a politically nihilist mentality that believes any politician, whether you agree with them or not, policy/morality that takes a direction and makes or strategic choice you don't agree on is a sellout or a fraud. Now this is extended to YouTube post. I think since I wasn't into this movement until last year, that I'm not going to fully understand everything that transpired after Bernie Sanders dropped out in 2016. However, I think there's big tipping points. And everything that you've seen these progressives and the squad fail to do is because they're not just small things that we could just show, oh, okay, that's no big deal. No, they're letting go of the big important things of the left platform. And that's why you're seeing a heightened level of frustration, because you don't need to take money to be a sellout. You could just be corrupted. You can be corrupted and compromised without taking money. And you don't have to sell out for money. They sold out to a system. And they've got a chance to turn it around if they want to, but they won't. In my view, this destructive all or nothing black or white mentality continued on AOC on bringing the ruckus to the White House, but so far folded like cheap tents after that. A large swath of progressives dive even deeper, saying, I don't care who is running, they have a D next to their name or cancel. Essentially saying to hell with the system, with candidates running scorched earth against the Democratic Party, and aren't breathing like fire like YouTube hosts are canceled. Even though I'm going to be highly critical of progressive politicians, if they start to get their act together and fight the right fucking way, then yeah, I'll give them credit again. Otherwise, they're going to be treated like they're largely canceled if they continue to go on the road they have. As for future progressives, my answer will be they will be better to have in place of their shitty corporate opponents. But just don't get your illusions up that it's going to mean that X amount of progressives are finally going to get shit done in Washington. Because as I've told you, when you think you're about to add more, the system is subtracting. And at the same time, I know we're not impactful enough to say things like, I'm never voting for any Democrat again. If there's ways that our media influence is impactful, it's not saying statements like that. I think there's ways that our influence can reach beyond our circle. Like Force a Vote can gain traction outside of the online left, defund the police, reparations. But things like that, this isn't things that are gonna have impact to be said outside of your audience. Even though that's why I'm not as hard on I'm not full out attacking future progressives who try to run. Just because they are marginally better than the corporatists they replace. At the same time, I know we aren't important enough to have that type of influence either. And if we are down on electoralism as a whole, then these things aren't going to matter much one way or another. But I respectfully ask for folks who fit in this category to take a step back and ask yourself, do you think that multi-layered corruption and corporate capture of our system, that government happened overnight? Trust me, I covered Burma 2016 on the road. This political euphoria and awakening for millions of people to believe we can tear down this system quickly. And it would only take one political messiah getting into office. But having traveled for 6 years and observed close to more misery, injustice, and corruption on the streets and local level than you can ever imagine, I can tell you with 1,000% certainty what has become the United States corporations in America was never going to fall in 2, 4 years, or even 1 decade. And no single politician or group was going to be the one storming the gates and topple the corrupt oligarchy, depriving you of Medicare for all, Green New Deal, jobs guarantee, UBI, reparations for black people, or saving planet Earth. Alright, I don't think even the people who are highly frustrated are even going to disagree with the fact that the timeline of when that change would happen. But the problem is, we can't give these people the benefit of doubt when they just refuse to fight for us. It'd be a much different story if we saw progressives try to force the vote, if they tried to force the vote on Medicare for all, but it didn't move the needle one way or another, or if they tried to force the inclusion of a $15 minimum wage, but they were outmuscled by the establishment. The problem comes down to lacking proof of them trying. Because if it's just fighting for funeral expenses covered or approving COBRA, those aren't things the left asks for. Those are easily things that your standard liberal could have done. This isn't about whether Bernie Sanders is weak or not, fighting hard enough. Same goes for the squad, and yes to both. What this is about is progressives need to decide their number one priority is. It's either every YouTube host politician agreeing on all things, all strategies, actions, demanding those some politicians rant and rave to a degree you want, or else they are counseled or withdrawn, or they are actually focused on taking down this corrupt system and seizing the power. This does not mean... Alright. That's where the issue lies. Is the fact that there's too many people who think we still have to play to this incremental inside strategy. And the problem is, if an inside-outside strategy is the way we're supposed to go about it, there's too many people who are just full out dismissing doing anything from the outside. And at this point in time, we're just better off putting all the resources to the outside part. Because if progressives and Congress aren't going to be receptive to fighting for what we need, then we might as well just do the pressure campaign ourselves. And they very well may cave, even those corporate Democrats may just cave to us if we put enough pressure on from the outside. And we got a lot of work to do to get that done. Not criticizing politics. This does not mean criticizing politicians' hopes on strategies or votes or anything else, but there is a stark difference between disagreeing or being disappointed and creating a progressive movement that spends more time eating its own than organizing a fight. I don't think you've been paying attention enough, Jordan. There are some leftists that are trying to do things to refocus this left-wing movement in a way that doesn't get us crushed by people who fail us. But the thing is, there's still people who think that other part is still needed. Corporate Democrats, country club Republicans, and lunatic GOP to actually change this country from a government that has morphed into a legalized option to the highest bidder to an actual representative democracy. If anyone thinks you can build a successful political movement to achieve our policy goals, much less a successful general strike that shakes the capitalist system by mass canceling YouTube hosts, every politician who doesn't feed you what you want 100% of the time, then be prepared for very entertaining online content for the next decade marked by conflict, clickbait, manipulation of viewers, and cultism, while at the same time plutocrats scoring every victory and the country's shift to fascism further cements itself. Look, we don't. Sorry, Sophros, Greek. I have a lot of background noise right now due to having to run a fan due to my air conditioning not working at this time, so I apologize for it, and hopefully it's fixed by Wednesday. Here's the problem though. We just don't have the strength in numbers right now to be important enough to where we have the relevance to have what Chariton is conveying as being the reason for why the country is shifting further to fascism. The real issue is Bernie Sanders just had far more liberal supporters than we just originally thought. And it's just proven every time that those past two elections where an overwhelming amount of people just capitulated and voted for the Democratic nominee. And hopefully they're frustrated enough by what the Biden administration has done in those 4 years and has come to the realization that pretty much no matter who runs from the Democratic Party, that they just want to win in 2024. And maybe that's what it takes to move them further over to us. Ultimately, you have to decide, do you want to have understandable political anger, frustration, disappointment validated by politicians or YouTube hosts 100% of the time, or do you want to actually win big political victories and focus on waking up more people, bringing them into the progressive movement so your army can grow larger? Because I got news for you. No one wants to join the shit show I've been seeing for a month. Cancel me if you want, but this threat is the reality. I hope the people applies to consider. Chariton, you are misunderstanding what is happening here. There's even people on this side of the left here. We have our disagreements on electoralism, on how we would get the general strike off the ground, and we are cracking down on each other for those disagreements, because there'll be some small things communist and socialist and anarchist will all have disagreements with. But I think if we are solidly on the right side of the left, then we are going to look to cancel people, though. But if you're on that opposite TYT Sam Cedar left, then we know those disagreements that they have with us are much larger here. And I think the best another big grain. I know the most prominent figures in the movement keep failing you at every turn, but you should be less upset about a take. The reason we have no wins is because the people in the movement, the most power, keep undermining it. Agreed. That's why we are not having success right now. And the fact that we just haven't gotten enough people on board yet. For example, if 50% of people who supported Bernie Sanders in the primary, even if it didn't even need to be that high, but let's just say 10% of Bernie Sanders supporters just rejected whoever the Democratic nominee was, and 7% of those people voted for left-wing third parties. Think about how much different that outcome would be. compared to what we saw transpire over the past two runs for Bernie Sanders, where we just learned that a lot more of his base was liberals who just wanted some social Democrat type platform. The issue here isn't that we just need to get more people to agree with us on policy. The majority of the people already do. We're at the point where people need to be mobilized to force the hand of the establishment. That can't happen when Bernie and AOC are telling millions of people to roll over for the Democratic Party, and now they're challenging leadership. When it counts, good luck getting Medicare for all when the best opportunity for the vote presents itself and shows tell their audience of millions who nominally agree with the idea Medicare for all that voting on it is a bad idea. Yes, thanks a lot TYT, Majority Report. You have all those rad libs that if you had just been on board with it and helped mobilize it, even though there's personalities to your left that you hate, we would be in a different spot going forward. We'd probably have more momentum built towards building an outside movement to maybe make these Bernie Sanders and AOC types to feel more pressured. But it doesn't help when people who tell us they're left but are counterproductive to the left at the same time. So, Unapologetic was spot on. These aren't minor disagreements every time we have leverage to advance our agenda and they find some way to undermine us. Yes, the oligarchs have rigged the political system, but that's true in every country. The absence of any real resistance is a top-down issue. We give them the power to wield on behalf of the working class and instead use their power to make the left fall in line for the establishment. Everything the prominent figures are doing is counterproductive, and they're taking millions down that path with them. Enough people realize this now. That's why we won't let it go until there's some reckoning with this. Thanks, Unapologetic. You just flat out nailed it, and that's why I thought you were the best overall response to Jordan's sharing. Even better than the one given y'all live here on Twitch right now. And the main problem is there's too many people who believe in AOC, the Squad, and other progressives, and they just think it just comes down to a process of electing more, and that they still trust them to follow through on their platform. We must make them aware that they're not going to do that. And until we get those people who will vote the progressive politicians to realize that, and that's why we are in a holding point until we find a way to build momentum. And Jordan did respond to him. Guess you didn't read the whole thread. I did, and wrote a thoughtful response. I guess it's just easier to strawman me as some irrational simpleton than address a valid counter-argument. And that was the most frustrating part about this thread from Jordan, is he just full-on strawmanned all the left criticism as being unreasonable. And the framing was completely off as well. And that's the problem here. Even though there's going to be moments in left-wing, this left media movement where people are going to get into some type of ugly fights again, but there's going to be times where it's more dramatic than others. There's times where there's real tipping point issues involved, and it's important to differentiate between the two. However, Jordan, even though he supports Jimmy Dore and Aaron Mate on that issue of TYT, his framing was really disingenuous here with the way that people are frustrated with progressives. And he thinks that people aren't trying to come up with alternative ways to get the ball rolling forward. And he just shows that he hasn't been paying attention well enough to those aspects. Because if you watch channels like Fred Hampton Leftist, Unapologetic, there's quite a few channels who are actually those are the main people who are actually trying to come up with ways to move forward. Frank Analysis, Comrade Misty, they're trying to actually come up with ways for the left movement to move forward. And Jordan just comes off as not being extremely ignorant of